Okay. So, hello and a very warm welcome to GAAD 2026. I'm Sambhavi Chandrasekharan. I'm from Toronto in Canada, and I thank the Internet Society Accessibility Standing Group for this opportunity to participate. When Dr. Ashutosh suggested that I speak about global accessibility trends, I chose to share my thoughts on accessibility governance because, in my view, that is the most critical need held by organizations today. My talk will be very short, but I have packed a number of links into my deck. So, what I'm doing is I have just added to the chat a link to the deck. Please download it and you can view it later and you can go into the links inside the deck. So, like I said, the topic for today is from compliance to competitive advantage, shift up accessibility to promote effective accessibility governance. So, what is shift up accessibility? We are all familiar with the concept of shift left, right? Shift left is the idea of starting accessibility work earlier in the product cycle. Shift up signifies moving the responsibility for accessibility vertically up in the organizational hierarchy. It speaks to the need for leaders to take ownership for accessibility. And it also urges for the focus to be moved beyond regulatory compliance to the real benefits that accrue when an organization embraces inclusion of people with disabilities. Because it leads to innovation, it leads to improvement, it leads to a lot of good things for the organization. Today, I see increasing awareness all around about the need for managing accessibility by leaders. We all know we can't do this alone, and that's what GAAD is all about, right? So on the screen, you will see a quote by Martin Esser, the founder of Zero Project. I want this to be the opening message because it's so in tune with the spirit of GAAD. The message says, no single ministry, no single country, no single company, no single organization can achieve an inclusive society, an inclusive world on its own. It takes all of us, with and without disabilities, to get there. How true. Actually, I'm very deeply involved with Zero Project. They work towards a world with zero barriers. They discover and promote startups and initiatives that are owned by people with disabilities or organizations that create products and services that improve the lives of people with disabilities. So on this Global Accessibility Awareness Day, let us pledge to work together globally to promote an inclusive society in an inclusive world. How can we do that? I invite you to connect with me on LinkedIn. There's a QR code on the screen, or you could do it later on with my deck. You can scan the QR code, or you could search for me, my name on the LinkedIn, and you can connect with me. The slide also shows my bio. Why I have it there is because you could check if we have common interests, whether it's academia, nonprofit, industry, policy and standards, business, disability community. I'm sure we'll intersect somewhere. When it comes to a day job, I'm the Global Accessibility Lead at D2L, and D2L is a learning technology company based in Canada. We have global operations, and like Divya said, my job is to ensure that our learning platform is accessible to the 21 million users in 1,400 customer locations in 40 countries and 6 continents. And that thought keeps me up, gets me up out of bed every morning, and it also keeps me up at night sometimes. Moving forward, what is the agenda for today? Shift up. So I will talk about why shift up, what is shift up, how to shift up, and also have a call to action for all of us. The more I worked on shift up over the past 2 years, the more I found it to be applicable not only for educational environments, but for any tech environment in the industry that serves humans. Because When leadership adopts shift up accessibility and they view accessibility governance as a strategic imperative, they gain the power to shift business from a compliance pain point to a competitive advantage. And for a business, this means moving it from being an expense to being a revenue source. So let us first see why shift up. As accessibility professionals, we are all doing our work. You are doing your work. But very often, you hit a ceiling. When it comes to budget or resources or key procurement decisions, you might not get what you want. You can't do anything about the ceiling because it is structural. Repeatedly, you keep firefighting. Your teams could be fixing the same issues release after release, or your teams could be fixing content issues forever because the root cause lives above you and it's never addressed. When it comes to audit and remediation, again, you could always be on the remediation hamster wheel, spinning faster and faster, but you don't get anywhere. Constantly new content is produced, constantly you keep doing remediation, but it never gets done. What you deserve is an accessibility flywheel. A flywheel can store energy and it can keep moving by itself. Your leadership must invest to get that flywheel. Again, you might experience budget cuts when you least expect it. And this happens because accessibility might be living in a project or a program and not as part of the infrastructure. When priorities shift, accessibility disappears because it was never a part of the structure. There's another thing about accessibility not being on the scorecard of leaders. Leadership might say they support accessibility orally, but is it there on their KPIs, key performance indicators, the budgets, the board reporting? That's the questioning we have to do. There could be so many other problems. Shift up, in my opinion, is the answer to the question we all have been asking throughout our careers. How do we get leadership to own this, to own accessibility? Because accessibility culture must start at the top. And it must be reinforced by the systems all the way down. We all know prevention costs less than retrofit. With good governance led from the top, we can prevent reactive chaos. With leadership support, accessibility can become holistic, unified, and measurable instead of being siloed and invisible. Because when accessibility shifts up, there is larger impact. The impact expands workforce participation. The more accessible the environment in the organization, the more productive employees can be. And when you produce more, there's economic contribution. Accessibility can unlock, I think there are different figures. One of the reports says 18 trillion disability market. It strengthens brand trust and consumer loyalty. It drives inclusion across products and it contributes to sustainable economic growth. When leadership understands these business benefits, then their mindset shifts from minimum compliance to long-term strategic investment and commitment. And then comes greater support for all accessibility activities. But then what exactly is Shift Up? The essence of Shift Up is that leadership must take charge. I've been telling it again and again and again on every slide. When leaders govern accessibility top down, they create policies, they create plans, programs, processes, they create resources and budgets. Then accessibility initiatives can be executed smoothly. When leaders model a culture of inclusion top down, it becomes an organizational culture. And by doing this, leaders also feel justified in promoting accessibility because they know that it's not only good for all humans, but it's also good for business. And sustained accessibility practice leads to compliance. We don't ignore compliance, it is the floor. It leads to compliance, but that compliance is grounded in equity and it's backed up by positive business outcomes. What have I done by way of developing a framework? Let us see. On the screen, you see a model of the conceptual framework that I have developed. Shift up accessibility. The architecture has 5 pillars or dimensions. The first pillar is empathetic culture. These are the things that the organization should develop. Empathy is an essential component for everyone in an organization to understand that people are different and people will have different needs. Customers will have different needs and we have to meet their needs. This pillar is about building organizational awareness, building accessibility culture, and building literacy about lived experience. How do people with disabilities live? What is their experience? That knowledge is very, very important to build in an organization. The second pillar is called compatible technology. Regardless of whether technology is built or procured, this pillar is about ensuring that tools, platforms, and technologies that are procured meet accessibility standards. This is really, really important. The third pillar is accessible content. This is about ensuring that all the digital content, whether it's created, curated, or procured, is accessible. The fourth pillar is inclusive delivery. This is about ensuring that the products and services that an organization produces and offers are usable by all and they exclude no one. The fifth pillar is collaborative community. This is about accountability for accessibility across the teams in the organization and also across broader ecosystem of partners and vendors. Such a governance framework makes it easier for organizations to practice accessibility easily. How do you shift up? I'm going to offer a couple of implementation examples because if you can't really make it happen or make it practically usable, then there's no meaning in having a framework. These governance framework and operational framework that I'm going to share are not mine. They were developed by some other people, but they work with my framework. So the first one is a high-level governance model that was done by Dr. Angela Jackson. She's from the University of South Dakota. Dr. Angela Jackson's doctoral research created a pioneering framework. It's called the J4P framework. It has 4 components: people, policies, practices, and planning. If any of you is interested to know more, I have added a link to Dr. Angela's LinkedIn profile. I've also linked to her presentation that she did at the D12's Accessibility Interest Group meeting. Dr. Angela also teaches an EDUCAUSE Learning Lab. It's a workshop that EDUCAUSE does. So all the links are on the slide. Another way in which the Shift Up accessibility is implemented is through the Champions framework. This is created by Dr. Sarah Stevens. She's from the Delaware Technical Community College. And she used the J4P as the foundation for her doctoral research, and she created another one called Champions Framework. This contains 9 elements that serve as key performance indicators or KPIs. Usually, KPIs are done only in the industry. The higher education field does not have them, but she has created the KPIs. There is a list of the 9 elements, starting with course content, technology, and resources to sustainability. All of them are listed on the screen for, in the interest of time, I'm not reading all of them out because all of you will have the deck with you. Now, Dr. Sarah's accessibility KPIs are specific to higher education. They are aligned with federal accessibility laws and standards like WCAG, and they are grounded in best practices. So I would say you should watch the video that's linked over there to understand what that framework is. You could also connect with her on LinkedIn. And interestingly, the 9 elements in the Champions framework map either one-to-one or many-to-one with the Shift Up accessibility framework elements of culture, technology, content delivery, and community that I mentioned earlier. All this having been said, what can we do as action? I have just mentioned some roles and what we could do in those roles. And I'll also mention what we do at D2L because I can't just come here and talk if we haven't really walked that walk. Are you an accessibility practitioner? If you are one, then try to map where accessibility reports in your organization. If accessibility is reporting only in HR or legal, that's a problem. You have to have a conversation to move it to where it must belong in your organization, depending on the context. In D2L, I report to the Chief Product Officer. The Chief Product Officer is the executive sponsor for accessibility. The second thing you could do as a practitioner is build the case for at least one executive metric, one accessibility point on the scorecard. At D2L, we have OKRs and KPIs around accessibility for many of us. Are you a manager or a director? If you're one, then you can identify one upstream decision. It could be procurement, a product launch, hiring, and check whether there is an accessibility gate. In D2L, for technology procurement, we have an accessibility assessment process that it has to pass. Our partnership certification process also applies the same accessibility assessment process to certify vendors if they want to integrate with our learning management system. You can also propose accessibility as a standing agenda item in your next leadership meeting. In D2L, accessibility is on the recurring agenda in many contexts in leaders' meetings. And as a third option, are you an executive? If you're an executive, ask your team, where does accessibility report and does it have the authority it needs? You have to give them the authority. And like I earlier said, I report to the C-suite. And that's how important accessibility is to D2L. As an executive, you could also audit your top 3 AI vendors and check if their accessibility claims are valid. We in D2L apply the same accessibility rigor to all technology procurement, including AI vendors. In addition, in Canada, and I've given the link there, we have published standards for accessible and equitable AI systems. These standards get applied on top of the ICT procurement standards. Finally, I'm at the last slide. Thank you. Thank you again for all of your participation. Helen Keller said, alone we can do so little, together we can do so much. So please let us connect and collaborate. Thank you.